Most people never think about this moment. It feels too small to matter, too ordinary to be dangerous. But I'm telling you, after more than 20 years in cardiology, this is one of the most overlooked risks I see in adults over 60. And it happens before your feet even fully touch the ground.
I've spent the better part of my career sitting across from patients who were doing everything right. They were taking their medications as prescribed.
Their numbers looked good. Their routines were steady, predictable, responsible. These weren't people living recklessly. These were people who cared about their health. And yet, again and again, I would see the same pattern show up in the most unexpected way. Not during exercise, not during emotional stress, not in the middle of the night. It happens in the first 30 seconds after waking up.
That quiet transition between sleep and standing, the moment your body moves from horizontal to vertical, turns out to be far more demanding than most people realize, especially as we get older. And the reason this goes unnoticed is simple. It feels completely normal. There's no alarm, no warning sign that tells you to slow down. You've done it the same way for decades, and for most of your life, your body handled it without any issue. Think about a typical morning in the US. You wake up in your own bed, maybe just as the light starts coming through the window. You sit up, swing your legs over the side, and stand. Maybe you head straight to the kitchen to start the coffee. Maybe you check your phone. Maybe you're already thinking about your plans for the day. It's automatic. You don't question it. You don't pause. Why would you? But here's where I want you to stop for a second and really think. Have you ever stood up in the morning and felt just a little unsteady? Not enough to fall? Not enough to scare you? Just a brief moment where things didn't feel quite right? Maybe a slight dizziness. Maybe your vision dimmed for a second. Maybe you reached for the wall or the edge of the bed without even thinking about it. Something small, something easy to dismiss. Most people do dismiss it. They chalk it up to getting older. They tell themselves it's nothing. And then they move on with their day. But that moment, that exact moment, is what I want to talk to you about. Because what feels minor, what feels harmless, is often your body telling you something very specific. And if you ignore it long enough, one day it won't pass in a second. One day it won't be mild. Before we go any further, let me ask you to do one thing. If stories like this make you stop and think about aging, about independence, about what really matters, take a second to like this video and subscribe. This channel shares stories that don't sugarcoat getting older. And today's story might change how you see it entirely. Because what I'm about to tell you isn't theory. It's what happens in the first 30 seconds of your morning, and how something that feels completely normal can quietly become one of the most dangerous moments of your day. Now, let's continue the story. It was 6:32 in the morning. He got out of bed the same way he had for over 40 years. No hesitation, no pause, no second thought. He sat up quickly, swung his legs over the side, and stood in one smooth motion, the kind your body memorizes after decades of repetition. Nothing felt unusual in that first second. No warning, no signal to slow down. He took a few steps toward the kitchen, moving on autopilot. The house was quiet. His wife was still asleep. The routine was familiar. Start the coffee, maybe glance at the news, begin the day like every other day before it. He reached the counter, pressed the button on the coffee maker, and rested his hand lightly on the edge of the kitchen surface. That's when something shifted. Not pain, not pressure, just a subtle change. His vision dimmed slightly, like someone lowering the brightness on a screen. His hand tightened on the counter. He blinked, expecting it to pass the way it always had before. For a brief second, he told himself it was nothing. Just one of those moments. Just getting older. But this time, it didn't pass. The dimness turned into a narrowing tunnel. His balance slipped, almost imperceptibly at first. His knees weakened. His grip failed. And then, he dropped. There was no dramatic struggle, no attempt to catch himself. Just a sudden collapse, his body hitting the kitchen floor with a force that echoed through the quiet house. The coffee machine kept running. The room stayed still. A few seconds later, his wife heard the sound, not loud, but wrong. The kind of sound that pulls you out of sleep instantly. She called his name once, then again, louder this time, already moving down the hallway before she had fully woken up. She found him on the floor, motionless, one arm twisted under him, the other still reaching toward the counter. His eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911. Within minutes, paramedics were in the house. Oxygen, monitor, questions fired quickly, efficiently. They lifted him onto the stretcher, carried him out, loaded him into the ambulance. Sirens cut through the morning silence of the neighborhood as they rushed him to the ER. And then something strange happened. By the time they arrived, he was awake, confused but conscious. He could answer questions. He knew where he was. He didn't remember the fall, only the moment before it. At the hospital, they ran everything. EKG, normal. Blood work, normal. Brain scan, clear. No signs of stroke. No signs of a heart attack. No obvious cause. The attending physician reviewed the results, checked the monitors again, and found nothing that explained what had just happened. And that's when the real problem revealed itself. Nothing was wrong, and that's exactly the problem. When I saw him a few days later, he looked fine. Sitting upright, alert, even a little embarrassed by the whole situation. That's often how these cases present. The tests are clean, the symptoms are gone, and everyone is tempted to move on. But I didn't start with his chart. I didn't start with the ER report, and I didn't start by asking how he felt. I asked him one simple question. Walk me through your morning, slowly. He paused for a second, like the question caught him off guard. Then he began. He woke up, sat up, stood right away, walked to the kitchen, started the coffee. I stopped him. Did you drink anything before you stood up? He shook his head. No, I usually just go straight to the kitchen. Did you sit for a moment before standing? No, never have. Any dizziness before this happened? Even mild. He hesitated this time. Sometimes, maybe a little, just for a second, but it always goes away. That answer didn't surprise me. I've heard it too many times. I leaned back and nodded. I've heard this exact routine hundreds of times, and almost every time, it leads me to the same place. What happened to him wasn't random. It wasn't bad luck, and it wasn't something a standard ER test is designed to catch. It was a pattern, a very specific, very predictable pattern that shows up in adults over 60, especially those on blood pressure or heart medications. And it almost always leads me to the same conclusion. He looked at me, waiting. What you experienced, I told him, is something called orthostatic hypotension. Now that sounds technical, but the idea is actually simple. Ortho means standing. Static refers to position. Hypotension means low blood pressure. Put together, it describes what happens when your blood pressure drops too quickly when you stand up. I could see him trying to connect that to what he felt. So I explained it in a way that made sense. When you're lying down, your blood is evenly distributed. Your heart doesn't have to fight gravity. Everything is stable. But the moment you stand, gravity pulls a significant amount of blood down into your legs. Your body is supposed to respond instantly, tightening your blood vessels, increasing your heart rate, pushing blood back up to your brain. I paused. But sometimes, especially as we get older, that response is just a little too slow. He nodded slowly. That moment, I continued, when your body hasn't caught up yet, that's when you feel dizzy. That's when your vision fades. And in more serious cases, that's when you lose consciousness. He sat there quietly, replaying the morning in his mind. Because for the first time, it made sense. And more importantly, it wasn't over. Now here's the part most people don't realize, I told him. This isn't caused by just one thing. I leaned forward slightly. It's usually the result of several factors happening at the same time. And that's where the real story begins. He was listening closely now. Most patients do at this point, because this is where things shift. It stops being a random event and starts becoming something you can actually understand. This doesn't come from one single cause, I told him. It's almost always a combination. Several small factors, all lining up at the same moment. I held up my hand. Let me walk you through what was happening in your body that morning, because once you see it, you won't ignore it again. The first thing I asked him about wasn't his heart. It was his evening. What time do you stop drinking fluids? He thought about it. After dinner, maybe around 7. I try not to drink too much at night. That answer is almost universal, especially here in the US, where many older adults deliberately limit fluids to avoid waking up during the night. It makes sense on the surface, but physiologically, it comes with a cost. By the time you wake up, I explained, your body has gone 8, sometimes 9 hours without fluid intake, and during that time your body is still using water, breathing, circulation, basic metabolism. So by morning, you're mildly dehydrated whether you feel it or not. I leaned forward slightly. And when you're dehydrated, your blood volume is lower. Your circulation is less efficient. In simple terms, your blood is literally thicker. He nodded slowly. That alone doesn't usually cause a collapse, but it sets the stage. Then I moved to the second piece. Now, let's talk about timing. Not your schedule, your body's schedule. Your cardiovascular system follows a rhythm. It's not random. It's tied to your sleep-wake cycle, something we call circadian rhythm. And here's what most people don't realize, I said. The early morning hours, roughly between 6 and 10 a.m., are when your risk for heart-related events is at its highest. He looked surprised. I continued. Studies in the U.S., including data published in Circulation, have consistently shown that heart attacks, strokes, and sudden cardiac events spike in the morning. Why? Because your body is shifting from rest to activity. Stress hormones like adrenaline increase. Blood pressure starts rising. Your blood becomes slightly more prone to clotting. Everything is ramping up. I paused for emphasis. Your body is under its highest cardiovascular stress, right after waking. He didn't say anything this time. He didn't need to. Then I asked him about his medications. What time do you take your blood pressure medication? Usually around 9 p.m. Again, a very common routine. Many patients are advised to take certain medications in the evening. That timing works for many people, I said. But every medication has a cycle. It builds up, reaches a peak, and then gradually declines. I drew a simple curve in the air with my hand. The lowest point, what we call the trough, is when the medication is at its weakest level in your bloodstream. I looked directly at him. And for most people who take their meds at night, that trough happens in the early morning, right when the body is already under stress, right when dehydration is present, right when you're about to stand up. This is something your pharmacist at CVS or Walgreens understands very well, I added, but it's not something patients usually think about. Now we had 3 factors working together, but we weren't done. Let's talk about what happens the moment you stand up. I let that sit for a second. When you move from lying down to standing, gravity immediately pulls blood downward. Not a small amount either. I held up my hand again. Roughly 300 to 800 milliliters. That's about 1 to 3 cups of blood shifting into your legs within seconds. He raised his eyebrows slightly. And your body is supposed to compensate instantly. Blood vessels tighten. Heart rate increases. Blood is pushed back toward your brain. I paused again. But that response isn't always immediate. Which brought us to the final and most important factor. Your nervous system. Specifically the autonomic nervous system. The part of your body that runs in the background, automatically regulating things like heart rate and blood pressure. When you were younger, that system reacted almost instantly. 1, maybe 2 seconds. You never noticed it. I let that contrast land. But as we age, that response slows down. Not dramatically. Not enough to show up on a routine test, but enough to matter. I held up 3 fingers. 2 seconds becomes 3. 3 becomes 4. And then I said the part I wanted him to remember, and in those few seconds, your brain is undersupplied. That's it. That's the window. That's where the dizziness lives. That's where your vision fades. That's where your body loses balance. And when all 5 of these factors line up, dehydration, morning cardiovascular stress, medication at its lowest level, blood pooling in your legs, and a delayed nervous system response, you don't just feel off, you fall. I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I said it clearly. That's the moment people fall. That's the moment everything changes. He sat there quietly for a moment after I explained everything. You could see it in his face. The shift. Not fear. Not panic. Just clarity. The kind that comes when something finally makes sense. So what do I do? He asked. That's always the right question. Because the good news is this. This isn't complicated. It doesn't require new medications. It doesn't require expensive equipment. It doesn't require changing your entire life. It requires changing how you start your day. I'm going to give you a routine, I told him. It takes less than 3 minutes, and if you follow it consistently, it can dramatically reduce your risk of this happening again. I didn't hand him a list. I walked him through it the way he would actually live it. Tomorrow morning, I said, before you even think about standing up, you're going to do something different. Step 1. Before the covers come off, before you sit up, you move your feet. Not aggressively, not exercise. Just simple ankle circles. Flex your feet up and down. 10, 15 repetitions. The muscles in your calves act like a secondary pump, I explained. They help push blood back toward your heart before gravity has a chance to pull it away. He nodded. Right now, you're standing up with a cold engine. This warms it up. Step 2. You're going to keep a glass of water on your nightstand. Not in the kitchen, not later, right there. And before your feet touch the floor, you drink it. 8 ounces, minimum. He gave a small smile. I can do that. This directly increases your blood volume, I said. It gives your system something to work with before you challenge it. In the US, a lot of patients already keep medications by their bed. I tell them to keep water the same way. Same habit, same location, no friction. Step 3. When you sit up, you stay there. He looked at me. For how long? A full minute. Not 5 seconds. Not 10. 60. You can look out the window, you can check your phone, you can do nothing, but you stay seated. Because sitting is the transition point. It's where your body begins adjusting to gravity without being overwhelmed by it. In cardiology, this is one of the simplest and most effective interventions we use for orthostatic hypotension, I told him. Step 4. When you stand, you don't do it in open space. You stand next to something, a nightstand, the bed frame, a dresser, a wall. You give yourself a point of contact. Not because you expect to fall, because you respect that those first few seconds matter. I want you to think of it as a safety net, not a weakness. He nodded again, more firmly this time. Step 5. This is where most people miss an opportunity. I leaned forward slightly. At your next refill, CVS, Walgreens, wherever you go, I want you to ask your pharmacist one question. I said it slowly. Given the medications I'm taking, is there a better time of day to reduce my morning risk? Pharmacists understand medication timing better than most people realize. They see patterns across thousands of patients. This conversation costs nothing, I told him, and it can be one of the most valuable adjustments you make. Step 6. Start checking your blood pressure in the morning. Not randomly, not occasionally, consistently. Seated, before medication. Write it down, I said, even if it's just a small notebook, then bring it to your doctor. And ask this specifically, can you check my blood pressure lying down and then standing? That's called orthostatic blood pressure testing. It takes a couple of minutes, but it gives a clear answer. Many patients have never had it done. You're going to ask for it by name. Step 7. This part matters more than people think. I looked at him directly. You share this. With your spouse. With your friends. With someone at your community center. Someone at church. Someone at the coffee shop you go to every morning. Because what happened to you is not unique. And whether someone gets this information shouldn't depend on whether their doctor happened to bring it up. He sat back, taking it all in. 7 steps. None of them complicated, none of them expensive. I let a moment pass, then said it clearly. This takes less than 3 minutes, and it can prevent a fall that changes your life forever. I saw him again about a year later. Same man, same medical chart, same medications, but a completely different morning. He walked into my office calm, steady, no hesitation in his movement. We talked for a bit, went through his numbers. Everything looked exactly the way you'd want it to look. But what stood out wasn't in the chart. It was how he described his mornings. I don't rush anymore, he said. He told me he keeps a glass of water by his bed every night. That part became automatic within a week. He does the ankle movements before he even sits up. At first it felt strange, unnecessary even. Now he doesn't think about it. He sits on the edge of the bed for a full minute, not checking anything, not rushing into the day, just sitting, looking out at the backyard, watching the light come in. He said something that stayed with me. I didn't realize how fast I used to move through that moment. That 1 minute changed something for him. Not just physically, but mentally. It slowed everything down in a way he hadn't experienced in years. He hasn't had a single episode of dizziness since. Not once. No near falls. No moments of instability. Nothing. But more than that, his mornings are different now. He walks into the kitchen instead of rushing. He pours his coffee and actually sits down to drink it. No urgency, no autopilot, just presence. And that's something we don't talk about enough. Because what this really comes down to isn't just blood pressure or circulation, it's pace. As we get older, the body doesn't stop working. It changes timing, and if you keep forcing it to move at the speed it had 30 years ago, that's where problems begin. I told him something that I now tell all my patients. Aging isn't about losing strength. It's about learning a new rhythm. He nodded when I said it, because he had already figured it out on his own. So let me leave you with this. If you're over 60, take your morning slower. Not because you're weak, because your body deserves that transition. And if you love someone over 60, a parent, a spouse, a friend, send this to them today. Not next week, not when you remember. Today. Because the difference between a normal morning and a life-changing fall can be less than 30 seconds. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment below. What will you change starting tomorrow morning? I'd love to read your thoughts. Because next time, I'll be sharing something most people never talk about. 9 warning signs in your feet that could mean diabetes. Thank you for watching. And remember, your best years aren't behind you.